Welcome, friends and family around the world, to another episode of the Gunn Show. I am extremely excited, as I typically always am, but damn, there's some cool people in this industry. And I'm extremely excited to bring to you my good friend Jermey Parker. Now, Jermey, his technical title says metalworking fluid applications. I mean, it sounds like a tongue twister, right? But he is a specialist. What we really know him for is either the coolant pitbull or the coolant whisperer. This is the Gunn Show. Please welcome Jermey Parker to our show. Jermey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. So, we have talked a lot on social media, and I'm getting the great opportunity to talk with you today. And I'm excited to have you here because I can honestly admit, in my own ignorance, that I don't know nearly enough about coolant. So I'm excited to learn about your story, how you got into it. Did you fall like the Joker into a big barrel of coolant and just fell in love with it and transitioned yourself, or has it always been a thing? I'm really excited to hear your journey, Jermey. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience, how did you get into this world?
Sure, but I have to stop you right there. The official government definition of coolant is metalworking fluid.
It's a good place to stop me. Metalworking fluid is the official.
Huh? Yes. So to answer your question about where I got started, it started probably back in about 2002. I was working for a small petroleum wholesaler doing the typical fuels, general lubricants, passenger car motor oils, kind of just getting into sales for the first time ever. And what I learned, particularly after Hurricane Katrina came through, that when you sell fuel, it's very commodity. It's very like you can make or break a deal on a fraction of a cent with the big truckloads. And so I just kind of had a distaste for those types of sales. And a friend of mine actually had come down and worked with me on one machine shop. They actually called for some basic product. I didn't have any premium lines. It was just a major oil company product. And so what happened is I go with him and make the sale. He came with me. And at that point, I just really learned the value of a coolant and the transformation that can be made at a machine shop. And I said, oh, this is awesome, because not only does my product beat this brand, but that brand is everywhere. So this should be like shooting ducks. And so it really was just kind of like I had a narrative. I had something that really worked, and I just kind of evolved over time. The coolant itself kind of evolved into industrial oils, because for every coolant you sell, there's always related oils. So it was just, the value selling. I'm a technical person, so I really enjoy watching transformations at the shop. I mean, whether it's finishes or tool life, it makes a difference to me, at least, versus selling something that it's kind of high flying, 10 cents here, hydraulic oil, stuff like that.
Well, metalworking fluid, I'm going to get it right now and not just coolant, but metalworking fluid, you consider a tool, right? This is a tool to create success, much like all the other, entities we need to machine parts.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's probably, I shouldn't say this too loud, but it's probably the most important tool in the machine. But we'll say that off. This is off the record, right?
Absolutely not. And in fact, people could turn the volume up on that part because you whispered it.
I think coolant is one of the most important tools just because it kind of impacts every part of the machine. And whether it's a stability aspect or an actual machining aspect, it touches everything. And so to me, and with the results I've seen, it really, really makes a difference. And that's one of the things that I really, really try and focus on when I'm talking to people about metalworking fluids.
Yeah, metalworking fluid, and you and I have discussed this a little bit before, but we when we're in a machine shop, and I was in a machine shop for years and years, we think about, okay, I need to manufacture this part. Okay, so what do I need to manufacture this part? And let's say it's a new one. Okay, first I need a machine. Then maybe I need tool holding. Then maybe I need cutting tools. Then maybe I need work holding. Okay, do I or do I not add a robot? Do you find, even though we're the knowledge behind coolant is so significant and the importance behind metalworking fluid, not coolant, is so significant, that it shouldn't be the last thing we think about. But at least in my experience, when I was in machine shops, I almost, and it was my failure, of course, but I almost was to the point that I didn't care almost. And now later in life, I'm realizing just how important it was. And to give you a little bit of my story, I was working with precious metals, gold, platinum, silver, palladium, that kind of stuff. I really, really could have used your wisdom back then, because we were burning up some diamond coated tools on something like platinum, ripping it apart. But coolant is extremely significant. Um, I think the world needs to learn a bit more about that, and the significance of metalworking fluid.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that many, many years ago, the standard for a good coolant was more just about stability. I don't even think semi-synthetics were pretty much in play. Soluble oils, um, people would judge it just on how long it lasted. Basically, if it, creamed out, split apart, and went rancid, and if it didn't go rancid, hey, it's a good coolant. Nowadays, just like phones, coolant technology has evolved extensively, and it's to the point where, when you're competing, you have to split more hairs about the machinability side. In fact, when I work with my team, I focus on stability and machinability, because again, like you were saying, a lot of guys don't pay attention to the machining aspect. Even a lot of the tooling guys. I was recently on the phone with a tooling guy, and he goes, well, our customers, they never look for performance when they call us for a coolant. They're more focused on, is it rancid, pricing. And so having, and also working for a tooling company, I kind of got the same narrative. So there's a lot left to teach people about the machinability side of coolants. Another thing too is perception. I'll give you an example. I was having a friend test the product, and he really loved the incumbent coolant. Big fan of it. But what I pointed out to him is, I said, you switched your coolant at the same time you switched your water. And so when you switched to the deionized water, you thought the coolant was responsible for the big change on the stability side. And I said it wasn't. It was the actual water. But if I hadn't have pointed that out, he could have gone on years thinking what a great product this is, denying himself the ability or desire to want to test a new product, to work on the machinability side. Well, he tested one of my products. And with the response I got, and this was on 17.4, he goes, I literally went from one part to two parts before having to index. And I said, oh, so you mean you improved your tool life by 100%? And he got the finishes. And I said, well, the finish kind of proves the lubricity. So for all you guys who think you're not getting any lubricity boosts out there because you're a job shop, if your finish gets better, you're getting it. So that's kind of like my daily gist when I'm out and about. These are the kind of things I focus on with people. It's very important.
Yeah, it is, and 100% tool life is no laughing matter. I mean, 100% more, right? Like that's incredible to me. And you mentioned a couple of great statements: stability versus machinability. I think that's something to focus on. The finish of the product itself, obviously, coolant matters for that. Modig Machine Tool was founded in 1947 in Sweden with a focus on building best-in-class machines. The family-owned company develops, engineers, and produces premium machines for high-performance machining in leading industries including aerospace, automotive, energy, and construction equipment. The Modig Machine series are all designed and built with high-quality rigidity, high dynamic stability, and precision technology modules. The common denominators that give Modig machines the flexibility, adaptability, and versatility known as the Modig differentiators. Learn more with www.modig.se. That is www.modig.se. as a piece of advice, how regularly do you think the coolant needs to be checked? Is this half a day, full day, weekly, monthly? Like, what's the because you mentioned that customer that had changed his water, and that happened to be, and then tried your coolant and saw some changes as you just mentioned. How regularly should we really be checking our fluid, our metalworking fluid?
I mean, it really depends on what you're doing, the environment you're in. Every shop has a different DNA, and that's why it's important uh, for a company when they choose a coolant provider, for someone to come in and really look around and look at everything from the coolant delivery system, the water, the sumps, the material. Do they have a full-time guy working on the coolant, or is it kind of like a free-for-all? Those all really make a difference. But if the guy's running deionized water, he's going to have a much more favorable coolant experience, even with the worst coolants out there. Because the water again is a huge part of the coolant sale. But if the guy really wants to look at his machinability and explore the performance increases he can get, then again, it's the right product for the right application. A lot of the times, people just look at the drum. Well, it comes in a 55-gallon drum, so they're all the same. And I'll point out, hey, it's what's in the drum that matters. Usually the price tag will kind of indicate what's in the drum, or should I say what's not in the drum. Um, but that's a constant battle. And you have to remember the biggest barrier to entry with a guy is changing out machines. So a lot of people really don't want to deal with it, because if they open the door for a new test or something, they're like, oh God, I got to change 35 machines, 40 machines. And so for whatever reason, it just gets shelved. I've always been more the pragmatic, hey, you know what? Just clean out one machine for a test, mix it in with the others. I'm not going to require you. Just know that you're kind of putting clean oil into dirty oil. So those machines you're mixing aren't going to last as long as the trial, but I get it. I'm not, I understand there's waste involved and stuff like that. So
Can you go into a little bit more detail about the deionized water or the significance of it for maybe some of our audience who doesn't realize the importance of different kinds of water?
sure. Yeah. So having sold the same fluids, kind of here in Texas, Texas is fun to sell in, because when you're off city water, it's like, what's behind well number one? Am I going to get rocks coming out of the faucet, or am I going to get like the softest water in the world coming out of the faucet? So, uh, but depending on the minerals, I like to call it the milk analogy. And the milk analogy is when you first start a coolant, and typically it's more with the high oil semi-synthetics, but it's kind of like a skim milk. Okay. And if you're in a hard water environment, that skim milk turns into 1%, 2%, then whole milk. And then your coolant turns into like a cream, and then a heavy cream. And that's called cycle up. And so as your coolant's aging with the hard water, because remember, most people don't realize that all those little white spots on your coffee pot that you see every morning are mixing with the coolant, making it thicker. Plus, you have all that tramp oil. Tramp oils like Wade lubricant or hydraulic oils mixing in. Um, so that kind of dictates, the life cycle of the coolant. But when you have deionized water, you completely neutralize that. In fact, the best selling I love to do is when it's deionized water to deionized water, because then the guy really only focuses on the machinability. Although I will say, deionized water, the one Achilles heel is that some of the coolants will foam, and that's one of the trade-offs. But it's a good trade-off to have. You can just go find the right coolant that won't foam with the deionized water. So yeah, the milk analogy is one that I always give to kind of have a guy visualize, as he progresses through the stages of the coolant. I think it's important, because in the fluid industry, and whether you're selling fuel, you're selling motor oil, coolant, you're always going to get blamed, you know, and you're always going to get blamed first. It's happened with fuel, it's happened all the time. And so when you sell metalworking fluids, you really have to go in with that. The best offense is a good defense mentality. because in a lot of these shops, like you're saying, the coolant guy, he's the most important part of that shop. But if you go into a shop and there's no coolant guy, and you say, "Where's the refractometer?" and they don't even have one, it's going to be a long trial. But that's where I love it, because I'll go get the guy a refractometer. I'll show him how to measure out the coolant by hand, how to do the machine. In Texas, I actually had two open top drum vacs, and I named them Dorothy 1 and Dorothy 2 because, like, if you drive into a severe thunderstorm with them on the back, people were literally thinking, "Is that the guy out of Twister?" And so I would unload them at the shop and do the service for the guy. I mean, I'd pull out the fluid, evacuate it out into his tote or his empty drums and charge it up. But even then, that's when the real selling begins. The real selling doesn't even begin until you do that trial.
So you mentioned those shops that you go into, Jeremy, that have no refractometer, that are dirty and grimy and that kind of thing, or maybe they're somewhat clean. They just don't test it, right? But I would imagine in your position, you might enjoy those even the most because maybe they create the largest significant success story for you. Am I wrong, or is this true?
Oh, dude, I got a great one for you. Uh, so I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I walk in. He's got about 5 mils, and it was so rancid that I almost let it go right on his floor. I mean, it was pretty bad. I won't say who the coolant brand was because I don't think it was their fault. I think it was the shop owner's fault. Uh, Most guys would have walked out. I was tempted to walk out and
That
just move
bad?
on. It was that bad. And so, but he was a really nice guy. And in this industry, you get to meet a lot of really nice guys, as you already know. So I go, okay, I'll work with you. And so I come back with my chip vac. And basically, what I had to do is I had to pull out the old coolant. I had to fill it with water. In the water, I had to put a cleaner in there. Normally, if it's bad, you put the rinse in. I had to rinse that. I had to go through that process 3 times, rinsed it 3 times. And then when I put the new coolant in, I still put bactericide in as a preventative measure.
Holy, I'm kind of ill to my stomach just thinking about it.
Well, sometimes the bacteria, even though you get the fluid out, it's still lurking in all the nooks and crannies in the machine. And so I'm a very meticulous person. I like to cover all my bases, and it worked. I mean, that guy, I don't know, like a year and a half later, he was still just adding. But again, help me with the cliche here. Is it leopards never change their stripes, or is it?
Sure.
Okay, so when you so what?
Leopards have spots, though, right?
Oh, is it spots? I don't know. I'm not really good in cliche land, but
Tigers don't change their stripes, I think it is.
there you go. There you go. So when you walk into this, and this is where a lot of coolant guys fail, is they have to ask themselves, are they prepared to work with this guy? Because you can do a quick fix, but he's going to resort to the same housekeeping practices or lack of. So you really, really have to be tenacious, um, and work with the people, because if you don't fix it, it's going to be your stuff in a year, and then you'll be out and it'll be someone else. And so I really work hard with the shops to try and break that cycle. It means a lot to me to do that because it just makes me feel accomplished. They're doing a good job. And at the end of the day, they always remember and they always want to do business with you. I mean, when I left San Diego 5, 6 years ago, some of the business was lost, and I was able to come back, and they remembered me, and I got trials right away. And people remembered that they call me the coolant police everywhere I go. So I almost had shirts done, my refractometer is my nightstick. Like, oh, here comes Jeremy, quick.
You have all sorts of nicknames, and they're all pretty good.
Yeah, people love to give me a hard time, but I'm okay with it because I think, being open with people and showing your real colors with people, humor, is part of the relationship. One of my best relationships in Texas was a guy who, I guess they call him a good old boy, but ended up being one of my favorites. And I'm from New York, so everyone was like, "How's he going to survive in Texas?" And did really well because I was told that people really liked my approach. Nobody ever came along and did what I did. And I'll give you a quick example. sometimes when you find out for a guy if he likes his coolant or not, he'll be like, well, I have great tool life. Click, they hang up on you. The cold calling, you just take it for granted, but you got to get to the shop. And a lot of the times, people aren't having a tooling life issue, but what they're having is one heck of a consumption issue, because you find out they're running their coolant at 50, 60, 70%, and they had no clue. But nobody came along. I tell my colleagues, I said the biggest part of selling coolant is knowing what the guy is currently using, because if you can't compare and contrast, how are you going to sell your own product as a solution? And so you really have to know, um, because again, that guy was happy with his product. He just over concentrated it to get it to work with the tooling. He had no clue it was completely the wrong product with the wrong application. And so those are some of the things I encourage, my colleagues. You got to get to the shop. Never take I'm happy with my tooling for an answer over the phone, because there's always usually something going on. Now there's some good brands out there that you really kind of got to split hairs about. Um, if the guy's doing a lot of ferrous material, a lot of steel, a lot of stainless, but he happens to be running a product that's more favorable for aluminum. Well, we have one that's more favorable for the ferrous material. So you can say to a guy, hey, look, I'll be honest with you. You're running deionized water. I don't think you're going to have a problem with either one of these on the stability side. But, you do kind of, if you look at it from a pie graph view, you're doing more of these types of metals. I think that we could probably do better on those holes, on those heavy roughing. Um, and you got to be honest with the guy. If you're just going to face mill across a piece, you're not going to see any difference, but you got to set the expectations. I mean, some coolant guys love to go in there and say, wow, our stuff's the next best thing since sliced bread. Guy puts in a piece of brass. Well, I don't see any difference. I mean, so you got to get the right jobs too. I mean, you have to be kind of like, if you're aiming for a certain application to demo your coolant and you don't get that application, you got to be honest with the guy. Hey, maybe can you move it over to a mill? And that's where you'll see more of the improvement. And so you have to really understand, especially nowadays, again, because there's a lot of good brands out there. So when you go toe to toe with some of the bigger brands, some of the more reputable brands, I mean, you do have to, um, again, split hairs, but service is a big part of it. You know, you, one of the things that a shop really wants to know when you solicit for the first time is, even if you have the best coolant, he's probably had a bad experience making your life not so great. He's probably jaded because the other guy came in and promised the best coolant too. And so you have to remember that, and you just got to keep going. Perseverance again, because the guy just doesn't want you to like up and run in the middle of the night. Oh, he charged up the sump and then he disappeared. And so that's part of being a good metalworking fluid salesman too, is just ensuring that that you are just going to be there for the guy, because again, you're constantly mixing oil and water. So it's a consultative sale, it's a reoccurring sale, and it's not like he can just pop out the carbide and pop in a new one if it doesn't work out. It's a whole process. So there's a lot of trust that goes into it, along with just talking about your product and the performance. um, my company does a lot of actual comparative testing. We have a great ability to quantify different types of coolants on paper through tap torquing. So we get a bar, we tap it, we basically measure the lubricity. And so as justification, we can say, look, and I don't even go brand to brand. Hey, sir, our brand's better than the other guy. I say, look, this is what you're using. We've tapped 3 different metals. You're using, your portfolio is maybe 50%, you're cutting this. Here's 6 different types of our coolants. So look, this is how it performs with this kind of EP additive. Here's what a high oil product looks like, a low oil product, a mid-tier product. So you can choose, you can kind of see, and then of course you can put your pricing on each column. So he starts to be able to see the value of what he's paying and what he's getting in return through a basic lab test. I mean, it's in lab, so sometimes out in the field things can change. There's oil in the sump or something that changes, but it's a defining narrative that, where if a guy's looking for a reason to warrant a trial, we can provide that with our comparative testing. And I've always been a big fan of doing this type of type of, I guess, call it pre-testing before you get in for the trial.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about it because I've never had the great opportunity to learn from this in great detail. And you mentioned a couple of words that I wrote down while you were talking. It's, meticulous and tenacious. It's very obvious that you're passionate about sales, you're passionate about supporting your customers, and you're an incredibly authentic person, which I think is important in the world we're in and who we work with. So you nailed it, my friend, when you said support and service is the next step once you have almost not necessarily apples to apples, but something competitive with one another. We really need to support our customers, and it sounds like you're doing exactly that. So when I start my machine shop, I know who I'm going to call.
Only if you're gonna like machine some comic book characters.
We can do that. I think we can only sell them in Mexico and not the U.S., but we can do that.
Established in 1998 and located in Barrie, Ontario, Canada, AeroX Technologies is a manufacturer of mist collectors and industrial air purification systems. With a mission to create a superior product in an industry where subpar performance was previously normalized, AeroX specializes in compact machine mount mist collection solutions as well as central industrial air purification systems. Both are equipped with progressive and fiber-bed filter technology for industry-leading filter life and the ability to tackle the most demanding applications. AeroX air purification systems can be found in production facilities, schools, and medical offices across North America.
Speaking of your, high level and passion for sales, we went over a story that was, kind of muddy waters into clean waters kind of a thing, or a stinky shop that made me ill just hearing your story. But do you have a greatest success story that you could share with us? Like someone who, I don't know, couldn't finish a part, but ended up getting a mirror finish because they changed their coolant, or someone's tool life who was, more than 100%, which is still a lot, but more than, really amplified their tool life, or maybe saved the life of their CNC machine as it was getting older and not being rusted and run down from, having too much water or too much oil or whatever it might be. Do you have one that stands out? Or it could just be a heartwarming one where you helped out a small family-based business that was, just really needed some help. Anything that comes to mind for you. And I tell people this all the time. I act a little bit long-winded because I want to give you a moment to think about it. So I'll talk a little slower to give you a good moment to think about what your favorite story is in your career so far.
There really is no one particular instance that comes to my mind. And I'm not trying to be elusive on the question. I just think that the fact that I started out filling 5-gallon pails of motor oil when I was about 20 and morphed into working for a very reputable company as an application specialist, being able to teach other guys how to fish. To me, that's the story, and if any motor oil guys out there or coolant guys, I mean, you can make a good career out of selling metalworking fluids, and if you work hard, because I'll be honest with you, it's a tough job. I mean, I remember pushing 55-gallon drums of coolant on a little tiny dolly across these parking lots in Texas. It's 115 degrees. You hit the crack where it almost falls over and splashes all over the guys, and I'm like, oh, why do I do this? But it's the results. I really love it when a guy says your product helped me. And it can be price too. I mean, I probably spend so much time on the machining. Value includes pricing, okay? If I were to sell a guy a coolant and it meets par on machining, but it helps him on price, he's still got value. It doesn't always have to be, wow, my finishes are off the chart, or, and that's what I remind people. Look, it's, I just don't go there first thing. A lot of guys will go to the cheapest price in their, their product line and try and get in the door. Yeah, I do have one. Actually, I do have one.
Oh, here we go. I knew it'd
Okay.
pop out eventually.
Okay. So there was a company in Fort Worth that would sell a drum of coolant to the door for about $600. $600 for a drum of coolant. And what made it difficult to beat is it actually didn't go rancid, which was like very perplexing. Something at that price tag wouldn't go rancid. And so everybody would tell me, "Oh, they can't beat it." I said, "You're never going to beat $600 coolant with $700 coolant. It's not going to happen. It's going to perform the same. Guy's just going to laugh it off, whatever." And so, but a favorite analogy I would always give a guy when I'm trying to appeal to his sense of testing was tires. And I'd always say to a guy, "Sir, testing a new coolant is kind of like tires. Okay, so we ride on our tires for 40 to 50,000 miles, right? We never really notice how they're degrading over time because you kind of just get jaded with it. It's such a long-term process." I go, "But when we go get the new tires put on, what do we always do? We make that first turn too sharp, right? Because we're not used to the new traction." I said, "Testing a coolant is the same way. You've been testing this coolant for so long, you probably have no clue what another one does. And just like changing tires, test this other stuff." "Well, Jeremy, your stuff's like $1,500. I'm used to paying six." I understand, sir. Just just work with me here. Okay. So he tests it. I come back. I mean, he's got a grin from side to side. He's like, "Well, Jeremy, I just have to tell you, we've got our lathe pegged. We've maxed it out. And look at the finishes and our tool life." And I go, "Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what $600 coolant versus $1,500 coolant looks like." Now I understand the sale is more complicated because it's obviously 100% a value sale. You're competing against a guy who's looking at, double the money, who doesn't understand it's going to affect his tooling or his cycle times. And so you just got to keep, okay, this is a great pun. You got to keep chipping away at it. There you go.
Da-dum-dum.
So, but then that guy almost said no. And I reminded him that he almost said no. And so to me, that was like the biggest accomplishment because nobody wanted to take on $600 coolant. And I went at it full speed ahead. I ran right into it, and then the great thing is once you get that narrative, then you can find the next guy with $600 coolant and explain to him what happened, and so it to me, I thought that was really good because nobody wanted to go after it. I won, and I proved that you can win with good quality stuff.
Well, to that story, you have a couple of nicknames, Pitbull and Coolant Whisperer, and to me, those are almost opposite things. The Pitbull goes after that $600 barrel, and the Coolant Whisperer just kind of stands there and is like, "Hey, you see what's going on here? Hey, you see that finish you're talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
So it's really two opposite tactics, I think, from my perspective. But hearing you tell your stories, you deserve both of those nicknames. You sound tenacious and inspired and professional, but also one of my favorite people on this planet is the Shark Whisperer, and I've never seen anyone swim with great whites. You're doing the same thing in the coolant world.
So think of like Braveheart trying to get into the shop. And then once the trial starts, then we turn into Ben Stein.
Freedom!
No, I mean, so at my new role, I've been here for about 2 months. And I think the word I've used the most is enthusiasm or crazy for coolant. I go crazy for coolant because I know enthusiasm trickles down and, people who've never sold it or just, like I said, man, it's a tough sale. I mean, I'm not going to knock other sales, but this is a very tough one. Your business cycle's long. I mean, it could take months just to get in the sump. The trial could take another 3 months. And remember, when you're trialing, everything that can go wrong could go wrong. Oh, the guy starts putting the old stuff on top. They dilute it. And it's kind of like dandruff shampoo. You only get one chance to make a first impression, right? So
That's not the first time you use that one, is it? That's a good one.
And so you really, again, so that's where the coolant whisperer comes in. I mean, I've had people ask me if I have a chemical degree. I've had people ask me. I said, no, sir, I just know my product very well. And it's my job to educate you, because if I don't educate you, then I'm just going to be doing more service calls down the road. So I guess you could say there's a mutual beneficial agreement, or agreement to teach them, is because obviously it's causing me less time in their shop. The more I can work on the front end, the more I can go on and I can help other people. I mean, in metalworking, it's still like 5% of your customers still consume, 95% of your time. Uh, San Diego, Inland Empire, it was your typical job shop was like 6 to 15 machines. So those are the fun ones. You walk right in, you just start conversing with people. Um, I've had large accounts too, where you go in, you got to be a little bit more C-level. Um, but the smaller ones, those are the great ones. Not to knock the big ones; those are great too. But you just didn't see a lot of that in the San Diego environment.
Well, you mentioned briefly, are you a chemist kind of a thing? And a lot of our audience, some are quite expert in the fields that they're in, and they really enjoy these podcasts to learn from others and see the wisdom that's going on. But a lot of our listeners are looking maybe to get into the career. So I just wanted to revisit that statement and go, well, Jermey does have a bachelor's degree in corporate finance. How we got into Coolant? It's obvious, guys, that if you want to be in this field, there's jobs for you, there's passion for it, there's you're gonna find something that you love about it, and that could be coolant, and it could be tooling, and it could be machines, but everyone tinkers around in a little bit different area. So to have a degree in corporate finance and to be the whiz kid or the coolant whisperer that Jermey is today, it shows to Goya what can happen as this domino effect that happens in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, having the corporate finance degree comes in hand because obviously you can talk about scale of economies, diminishing returns. Hey, if you buy that drum of whey lube with the inflation we're about to go into, you could probably sell it back for 3 times the cost in 1 year. So
have you done that?
It's not my best line, but yeah. But you have to understand from an economic point of view. I mean, everyone's steel prices have gone up, their aluminum prices have gone up. So when you talk about a customer's elasticity level, you have to be able to identify, I just have this really good knack of just talking with people. And you go in and somebody you're just normally talking to, all of a sudden they just talk a little bit differently. Now my wife says I read into things too much, but it's helped me in my sales career a lot because I've caught people that were cheating on me with other brands or, so, but you have to just be able to recognize that, sometimes in coolant, you sell against yourself. Hey, Mr. Customer's been happy with this premium product, but hey, the signs are coming, he's having difficulties. Hey, it's okay to say, hey, look, sir, I just want you to know that we do have this other option because people love options. I learned this selling hydraulic oil. I would carry a premium brand. They call you, hey, what's your price? Okay, I got X Y dollars. Then they hang up. They call another guy, but just because that guy was able to offer them a private label brand, he bought through them. So when I started bringing in private label, I was like, yeah, oh, we have this one, but we also have this one. But it draws out the question, what are the differences between the two? And once that guy asks you the question, then you can go straight into technical mode. And because you establish your credibility with the customer, you earn that trust, and he ends up buying through you anyways. But it's the option thing is very important. So when it comes to different coolants, I mean, I have a whole line. I could probably sell you 4 different products that would all cover a guy that's like 60-70% aluminum. Okay, different price ranges. But it just, knowing your customer's elasticity level, going back to the finance degree, it can help in the long term, especially in my opinion. I think in the next 1 or 2, 3 years, prices are going to go up a lot. And customers, the customers that, normally wouldn't budge on price are going to start, tinkling around. They'll allow themselves to be deceived by another salesman. Oh, sir, yeah, we have that same exact stuff. I've seen it a million times, you know, and I tell them, well, yeah, it's the same as it mixes with water, but that's pretty much where it ends. Um, so you just have to be able to spot that. If you're not able to spot that, um, sometimes again, like the tires, that maybe you sold the guy a really good coolant and he did see the value, but a year or two goes by, he forgets. He forgets the benefits that he got a year ago, 2 years ago, or maybe he's in that cycle up where his coolant has turned to heavy cream through no fault of the coolant, but and the guy will come in, hey, look at our coolant, it will run clean. I had that happen to me and I knew immediately, even though I wasn't required to. I had to run down to that shop. I had to pump out my old coolant and put in fresh coolant, just so when the guy saw the competitor's coolant, it was fresh coolant versus fresh coolant. Because I knew the competitor was trying to play off that my stuff was old and oily. Oh yeah, look how great that is. I said, hey, I can do that too. And so again, best offense is a good defense. And when you're selling metalworking fluids, and remember, metalworking fluids isn't just coolant; it's cutting oils. I had a guy come in, Fort Worth. He had some screw machines. He was doing a lot of yellow material, brass, copper on screw machines, and he goes, oh yeah, we use this generic cutting oil for this operation. But we also, when we do broaching on some stainless steel, we have to mix in this other oil. And he shows me this other drum. And I said, well, do you know why you're mixing that oil? Oh, no, it just works. And so I went over to him and I said, well, what you're doing is that other oil is about 20% chlorine paraffin, which is an EP additive. So I go, you're toll blending in your own shop. You just don't know it. And so I got on the phone. I called my guy in LA. I said, look, I need a drum that's going to do this, this, and this, but it's not going to stain the yellow material. Ship him out the drum. Guy goes, best oil we've ever used. And that's how I got to win the coolant business, by the way. I had to knock down the straight oil first before I could get the opportunity with the water-based product. So, but again, it's the same narrative, whether it's straight oil, water-based oil. It's right product, right application, right metal. I use the phrase, sir, do you know that you're basically putting a candle out with a bazooka? What do you mean? I go, well, you're cutting brass with like Godzilla product. I'm sure it's working, but you're paying for that, I mean, oh, we didn't realize that. Well, sir, yeah, we have one for that, or you can do the opposite. Like I said, with the overusage guy having to use a weak product, but run it really rich. So it's always fun. I like to play detective and to get out there. I was always naturally like that, you know. Um, my wife is Japanese. And she goes, "Well, you should go work in Japan because you got this eye that can spot things that most humans can't."
That's pretty awesome. Well, it's obvious that you're passionate about your work. Being a detective is cool, man. I've really learned a lot. And this podcast is a global podcast, and I don't know if you start getting millions of calls that you won't feel overwhelmed. So, what territory are you in now, Jeremy? And how can people find you and reach out if they want to discuss this with you?
Well, see, I'm glad you asked that because now I'm in that territory where I can take over the whole West Coast plus Texas. I have the privilege of working with teams in Washington, Portland, Montana, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and Texas. So I can help anybody in any of those regions. I can help you even in New York. I mean, I can just, no matter where you go, I want to help. I mean, again, it's very important that people use the right products, that they work with a company that gives them good service, and they just, again, here's my finance degree, that they get the best return on the coolant dollars that they spend that they can get. But until people start viewing their coolant as a tool, that's our job to make people aware of that. Because again, a lot of people still aren't aware of that. And I can't tell you how important that is and how many drastic things I've done with coolants. And it's been several brands. It's, again, there's a lot of good brands out there. Um, but again, you can have the best brand and completely have the wrong mismatch. And so it doesn't do you any justice.
So I like to leave our audience with a closing statement. Maybe better than the Jerry Springer closing statement, although that might have been the only good thing about his show was the closing statement. And all that madness that was on there. But I'm going to leave our audience with one last question for you, Jeremy. And I'm really grateful that you're here, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's been so much fun. Um, what piece of advice could you share with our audience that's kind of helped you in your life and through your career? And you can be through business, it can be through family, it can be something personal, whatever touches you most that you think is worth sharing with our global audience that's helped you become the amazing person that you are today and the successful person that you are today.
I'll give you 3 things. First one is never take no for an answer.
That's the pit bull.
Those no soliciting signs on the building, what are those, right?
What's that really mean anyway?
I look at it as like welcome. And
you can't read real good. That says welcome, right?
Like what? I didn't see that. Number 2, just give it your all. Be passionate about it. I've actually been told I'm too passionate. And my response to that was, well, my passion is what keeps me going. You know what I mean? It really drives me. It makes me care about things that other salesmen wouldn't, man. I've driven across county lines to deliver a 5-gallon pail to a guy because I've had that few experiences where he ended up moonlighting in his garage, but worked for that company that had 50 mils. And that leads into my third. Treat everybody how you would want to be treated. When I was a distributor, I learned very clearly how a manufacturer's rep can make or break a business, and now that I'm in a role where I'm maybe hoping to get to deal with people who, I've been in their shoes, right? Because I'm going to be working with a lot of distributors. It's my goal to treat these people how I wanted to be treated. And that's by answering the phone, answering emails, helping with technical stuff. I just have a different view because I've walked those shoes so many years as a distributor. And now I have the real blessing to pay it forward to all the people I'll get to see in the future, because hey, I've only been here 2 months. So, and hopefully in 20 years, it would be ideal that my brand is number 1 around the world. That's my goal. I know that's a big task, but I think my team can do it.
Excellent advice, Jeremy. And thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom, being a part of the Gunn Show. And I can't wait to hear the feedback that we get from this. I really, honestly think that this part of the industry is understated and needs to be shouted to the rooftops. I think we need to get the significance of metalworking, coolant, machining, all that good stuff. We need to get it out there. So, guys,
Tony, yeah. I'd like to say one final thing.
You're not allowed. You've already said enough. I'm just kidding. Of course you can.
I just want to give a plug to you because you've actually been very influential for me. Your positive nature spreads too, my friend. So I just want to let you know that. And we do talk a lot on LinkedIn. And so I'm very happy for you and your career as well.
I really appreciate that. Flattery will get you everywhere, so I've heard. And pretty soon I won't be able to walk through any doors, but I do appreciate that. Guys, this has been the Gunn Show. We do our very best at bringing artificial intelligence, or in this case, liquid coolant to life. So I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to Jeremy. Give us some feedback, and we'll see you next time. Jeremy, thanks again, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.